Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Fin to the Woods podcast with me, Finian Hackett, as I talk about all the latest theatre news from across the globe and from all corners of the world of theatre. We've got a lot to get through on this episode. A lot's happened in the last week or so, including the Tony Awards. There's a lot that went on, a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and we're going to be talking through that. Ian McKellen falling off the stage in London, very unfortunate for him, and lots of other things along the way as well. We're going to kick this episode off talking about some of the things that I've seen in the past week, and I've been very lucky to see 3 shows in the past week, I think. Yes, that is how many I've seen. I did a 2-show day for my birthday last week, going to see Sister Act and Kiss Me Kate. So let's start off with Sister Act. This is the revival at the Dominion Theatre in the heart of the West End, and it is now starring Alexandra Burke. It was starring Beverly Knight, but she has left the production to do other things, and Alexandra Burke is now doing the rest of the run. That was always the plan. I made that sound like it was more dramatic than it was. It's been the plan from the very beginning. And so Alexandra Burke's in it. You've got Lee Mead, who's just joined the cast, Lizzie B, who I love, Leslie Joseph's in it, and you've also got Ruth Jones from Gavin and Stacey fame playing the role of Mother Superior. I think that's her name. I always get Mother Abbess and Mother Superior mixed up constantly. But I saw Sister Act about 10 years ago. That was the last time I saw it, when Cynthia Erivo did the UK tour, and I loved it, and I loved the music, and I've always listened to the cast recording fairly regularly for the past decade or so. So I was very excited that it was coming back, and I missed it when this production was at the Hammersmith Apollo last year with Jennifer Saunders and Beverly Knight. Jennifer Saunders was not playing Dolores Van Cartier, just to clarify. And yeah, so I was very excited to go, and I took my friend Mia along, and I used my Today Tix vouchers. Please sponsor me, Today Tix, because I use you all the time. And I was pleasantly surprised by the production. I'd never been to the Dominion. I knew it was big. I knew it was a barn of a theatre, and it really, really was. I wasn't expecting it to be so big. That sounds slightly inappropriate, but I really wasn't. I really, really wasn't. It is so wide, and the aisles are so big, and it's like it was a cinema, so it has that essence to it. So there's part of me that wishes this production was in a smaller venue, because sometimes it felt like it was a little drowned out by the size of the auditorium and the size of the space, and because of the size of the space, sometimes the sound wasn't wonderful. I couldn't really understand some of the things they were saying, and I do know the show. I struggled to pick up on some dialogue and some lyrics, especially because a few of the songs that are in this production are not on the cast recording, so I really was trying to understand what they were saying, and I couldn't at times, which was frustrating. But I loved the lighting, I loved the set. I thought the set was really lovely, and it wasn't the whole width of the Dominion because it's so big. They'd kind of clipped it in a bit with the portals, which was fine. It worked well. And I thought the standout was Alexandra Burke. It's a great part. Dolores Van Cartier is a great part, and she has great songs. And I was pleasantly surprised by her. I saw her in Joseph at the Palladium as the narrator a few years back, and I wasn't expecting much, I have to be honest. But I was pleasantly surprised then, and I was pleasantly surprised now. She's played this part before on the UK tour, and she's clearly got it. She's got something. There's something about Alexandra Burke on stage that I really enjoy watching. She's quite warm, and I don't know if it's a nostalgia thing because I grew up with her music really, and her winning X Factor and her duet with Beyonce on X Factor and all of that. I don't know if it's something within me that has this warmth towards Alexandra Burke, but I think she's pretty darn good, and the more she does, the better she seems to be getting on stage, so who knows what else we might see her play in the future. Ruth Jones as Mother Superior was good casting acting-wise. I thought she played it very well, and I think it's always interesting with this part because so many women of so many different ages have played it. You've had Whoopi Goldberg played it in the original production for a little bit. You've also had Jennifer Saunders who played it. Leslie Joseph's taking over from Ruth Jones in a few weeks' time. And it's quite interesting how it's played by different people. Sheila Hancock played it in the original West End production. She originated the role over here in the West End. So it's played by a lot of different women of different ages and different abilities, let's say. I liked Ruth Jones as an actress. I warmed to her as a character. Her singing for me wasn't really up to scratch with the other people on stage, and that put a bit of a dampener on certain elements, because I think it's great sometimes stunt casting, it does work, and it's clearly brought in an audience for this. However, I just struggle sometimes when a character who has a couple of solo songs isn't the best singer and you have to just endure them because they're a good actor. I sometimes struggle with that, especially when it's stunt casting. I'm sure there were other comedy women who would have sold tickets who could sing better than Ruth Jones. She wasn't awful. She could hold a tune, but I just wish she was at the same level as Alexandra Burke. Just because it's a smaller role and an old woman role doesn't mean it doesn't have to be sung as nicely. Her songs are lovely, and when they're sung properly, they are beautiful, and it's a shame when they're not. I loved Lee Mead. It was lovely to see him on stage. I don't think I've ever seen him in a show. I've seen him in concert, but it was lovely to see him in something. And I loved Lizzie B as Sister Mary Robert. I thought she was absolutely fantastic. Her voice is just insane. She's just crazy. I love it. It was a very pleasant matinee. It was quite busy. I mean, it's hard to sell out the Dominion. It does sell out, but it wasn't sold out on the matinee. It was midweek, so I wasn't surprised. But it's pretty good production, and if you love Sister Act and if you love the music, it's really fun and it's really enjoyable and it is funny and quite well acted, so do pop along if you can. In the evening, we had a very different set of affairs at Kiss Me Kate at the Barbican. So this is the new revival of the Cole Porter classic, which stars Stephanie J. Block and Adrian Dunbar of Line of Duty fame. Now, I was really looking forward to this, and I loved it. I do love Kiss Me Kate. I think it's a great show. This was my first time seeing a production of Kiss Me Kate. I've watched that DVD recording of when Rachel York did it in London in the early noughties, and I love that, and I love the score. I think it's brilliant. So I was really excited to see a production of it anyway. I love the Barbican, I love the stage, I love the auditorium, so it had lots of things going for it, and of course, I love Stephanie J. Block. She was absolutely marvellous as Lily Vanessa. I was blown away. I've seen her in concert, and I was so excited to see her in a role, and my God, she's just fantastic. It's effortless, and to be honest, I really do think she is the key to that production. Without her, I don't think it would work as well, because she is so strong, and I want her to win an Olivier for it, because I think she deserves it. She's just, you watch her, and you are just in awe of how good she is. And I know it sounds really wanky, but it's so true. And I think she's a very impressive performer. So if you go to see it, genuinely just go to see it to see her, because she is worth the price of the ticket alone. I thought both Charlie Stemp and Georgina Honora were absolutely marvellous as well. I love them both as performers. I've seen them individually in a couple of things, and they're both brilliant in this and are also standouts as well. The disappointment for me came with Adrian Dunbar. He's very famous to the general public, and that is why he's been put in this production, and I don't think you can really argue that, because he's never done musical theatre, and to be honest, it shows, especially when you are on stage with a Tony winner a lot of the time. And I struggle with that. It's a similar thing to the situation with Ruth Jones. Great actor. I mean, I think he's a bit too old for the part. He's 65 and Stephanie J. Block's 52, and they hadn't put him in a wig, so he's got all his grey hair flopping about all the time. The age gap, sometimes it looked like she was kissing her dad. That is the honest truth, and I know that's a bit harsh, but it's true. And I just struggled to find any chemistry between them at points. I did like their scenes together, but again, it sometimes felt a bit weird. And his singing voice just isn't up to scratch. To be in a musical like this, like Kiss Me Kate, when you've had great actors play this part, you've had Will Chase play this part on Broadway, you had Alfred Drake play this originally on Broadway, you had Brian Stokes Mitchell play it in the revival on Broadway in the 90s. All their voices are rich baritone voices that work so well with the score, and if you don't have that, you're a little bit screwed, and I just don't think his voice was up to scratch, and it was a real letdown for me. I was really looking forward to seeing him and hoping that he lived up to Stephanie J. Block, because they need to be equal, and they weren't, to be honest. I would have loved to have seen someone with more musical theatre background play that part, because I think it's really needed. And yeah, I was just slightly disappointed with that side of things to the production. However, when it came to the set and the costumes and the direction. I thought it was very, very clever, and I thought it made it more exciting, more fun. The whole set was like on a big turntable thing, and there was a part when Stephanie J. Block storms off the fake stage in the production of The Taming of the Shrew that they are doing, and walks through the whole of backstage, and the stage itself was spinning at the same time, so you got to go through everywhere with her. It was just little things like that I really enjoy in a production, and kind of brings it to life. Is it the best revival of Kiss Me Kate there's ever been? Probably not, but it's very enjoyable, and the show itself is very well written and an enjoyable watch. So if you get a chance as well, do go and see that. It is on Rush Tickets, on Today Tix, and there are quite a few sales on at the moment for it as well. So don't miss out on it. Just go to see it to see Stephanie J. Block, please. I was also invited to see Next to Normal this week. Now, this is the production that was on at the Donmar Warehouse last year. It was the UK premiere. It had taken years and years and years to get over here, and it finally happened last year. And now that production has transferred to a big West End theatre, the Wyndhams, and it had its first preview this week, and I went to the third preview, I think, and oh my god, I had no expectations for this show at all. I knew some of the songs, and I knew the storyline. I did know what happened, so I guess I did have some expectation. I'd watched a few bootleg clips. However, I was going in pretty blind, and I was just blown away. I'd heard such marvellous things about this, and there was a reason it got 4 Olivier nominations, and I was just absolutely blown away. I was with my friend Shania, and we had absolutely no idea what to expect, and at the end we didn't really know what to say to each other because we didn't have anything bad to say. I was a bit taken aback at how good it was. It was marvellous. I thought it was so clever and well directed and just a really masterful piece of theatre. I really did think it was. And the cast was so bloody strong, all 6 of them. There's only 6 people in that show, and all 6 of them were at the top of their game, and that very rarely happens. And I was just, I didn't know how it was going to work, especially adapting it from the Donmar when it was in a thrust setting into a proscenium march setting. They'd obviously kind of had to redirect it and change bits of it, which seemed to work because I hadn't seen the Donmar one, so I didn't know what it was meant to look like there to now, if you get what I mean. But I'm so glad I went. And that, again, is on Rush Tickets as well. There are cheap tickets for that if you want to go. You must. It's only on for 14 weeks. And I just was so impressed. It didn't feel too wanky. I love saying that, but it's true. It didn't feel too arty-farty to look at us, we're doing something different, which I think Next to Normal could have the tendency to be like that. But it didn't feel like that to me anyway. And yeah, if you get the chance, my God, do go. It's sad. It deals with really emotional and difficult subjects, lots about grief and mental health and drugs and a lot of different issues that will trigger a lot of people in different ways. But I think that's what makes for an interesting night at the theatre, because you don't know how you are going to emotionally react. And it was very emotional. It's very sad, but it's also uplifting at points as well. And I think that's what makes it a really well-written musical, and that's why it won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. It's one of the only musicals to ever do so. It's why it's so popular as well. So if you get a chance, do go. So yeah, I've seen 3 pretty good shows over the past week, all of which I would recommend that you do go and see. I was also invited to the Panto Awards, and you may be thinking, why are the Panto Awards in June? But that's because obviously Panto happens at Christmas. They have to nominate and then decide who wins, and by the time that all happens, it's the middle of the summer, and then everyone's back into Panto planning again. It's wonderful. But I was invited to go along to G Live in Guildford, where the event was happening. Last year, I think it happened at the Trafalgar Theatre in London, but now they needed more space, and there were loads of tables out, and it was all very fancy. I was going anyway. Me and my friend Daisy, who had worked on the Marlow Theatre in Canterbury's Panto Aladdin last year, which was nominated for, I think, 8 awards, and it ended up winning 3, which was marvellous. We'd bought tickets to go and see the Panto Awards, just to be supportive, and then I got invited about 3 or 4 days beforehand, and so then it was all sorted out, and we ended up going as kind of VIPs, which was really lovely. And we sat at a table and we got to watch everyone go up and accept their awards. And it was just a really lovely evening to celebrate such a British tradition and something that up until recently, hasn't had that sort of recognition, a big awards ceremony, and I think it was just a really lovely, lovely evening. Angelica Bell, Aurea Duba and Myra Dubois were some of the presenters, well, 3 of the presenters that night. And I love Angelica Bell. I've loved her for ages. I think she's a great presenter. I have a theory she's going to do Strictly, because she kept mentioning it, and she can clearly dance, and she's done panto, so maybe she can kind of do step dig, sway, do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So, yeah, that's my campaign for Angelica Bell to do Strictly, just from seeing her at the Panto Awards. But it was just such a lovely evening. My lovely friend Lottie Brogan won Best Secondary Lead, which was so lovely, and I forgot that she was going to be there, and then I realised she was going to be there, and then she won, so we got to see her win, and it was lovely for Daisy to be there, and also to be able to spend time with her Panto lot from over Christmas, including Mr. Maker, which was hilarious. But it was just a lovely, lovely evening, and a really great time celebrating such a great and big part of British theatre. Now it's time to move on to Broadway's biggest evening, the Tony Awards. Every year the Tonys happen and celebrate all there is on Broadway. Well, not all, the ones that get nominated. And it's always such a huge event, and everyone knows it all across the world, and it's a wonderful time. We don't get to watch it here in the UK because they still won't bloody broadcast it here, but I'm on the campaign trail for that, as well as getting Angelica Bell on Strictly. My 2 campaigns that are currently ongoing, apparently. But it was a very interesting evening because there were a lot of shows nominated, and it was fairly equally spread. Not equally spread, but it wasn't one show takes 10 awards, which it has been some years, which is always nice when it isn't like that, because it gives an opportunity for multiple productions to win multiple awards, or at least one award. It was hosted once again by Ariana DeBose, who has presented it for I think 3 years now, and I think this is her last time presenting it, she said, on the red carpet. And her opening number did cringe me out, I have to say. They have gone downhill since Neil Patrick Harris hosted it, when he used to do those incredible opening numbers with all these stars and those brilliant songs and all the shows. They haven't been as good since then, and that was nearly a decade ago. So yeah, I was slightly disappointed with the opening number, and I have been for the last few years, to be frank. But hopefully they will get better over the next few years. It was a great night for lots of shows, and it was a bad night for others. But overall, Stereophonic won 5 Tonys, the most of the night, followed by Merrily We Roll Along and The Outsiders, which each won 4 awards. You had Appropriate, which won 3, and then Hell's Kitchen and Safs each won 2 awards, and there were many other plays and musicals which won 1 each as well. I was extremely happy for Merrily We Roll Along with those 4 Tony wins. Merrily flopped on Broadway when it first opened. It did not too well, and the fact it's now a hit and it's done so well, it makes me very happy as a Sondheim fan. I wish, it sounds very emotional, but I wish he could have been here to see those Tony wins, because it was his biggest flop, really, and a very notorious one too, which is now doing extremely well, and that just makes me very, very happy. Daniel Radcliffe won Best Featured Actor in a Musical for his performance in the show, his first ever major award. He's never really won anything, Daniel Radcliffe, because Harry Potter didn't do that for him, and he hasn't done anything else really that has garnered him that sort of attention, and this has been great for him, and now he's a Tony winner, which lots of people could only dream of. So I'm really happy for Daniel Radcliffe and Jonathan Groff from the show, who won Best Lead Actor in a Musical, which, again, he's a lovely person and I love him on stage. I think he's really brilliant, and I was extremely happy for him. I was sad for Lindsay Mendez, the other lead who was nominated for Best Featured Actress in a Musical for the show. She didn't end up winning it, but the production did, however, win Best Revival of a Musical and Best Orchestrations as well, so it had a very good evening. Sarah Paulson also won her first ever Tony Award for Best Actress in a Play for her performance in Appropriate. Again, really happy for her. I think she's a brilliant actress, and I'm glad that she's finally come to Broadway. Well, she has done Broadway before, I think, but I'm glad that she's getting recognised on Broadway, which is always very lovely. I was shocked that Maria Friedman didn't take home the Best Director of a Musical Tony Award. She was the outright favourite to win that award. She was probably the only dead set that anyone had. Everyone thought she was going to win it. And she didn't. It went to Danya Tamor for The Outsiders, which ended up winning Best Musical. We'll get to that in a minute. I was sad for Maria Friedman because I think this, unless she directs something else as successful as Merrily, this might have been one of her only chances to win a Tony. Is that mean? I don't know. But I really, really, really do hope at some point she wins a Tony because I love Maria Friedman. She was a wonderful narrator in Joseph, and I'm proud that she's doing so well. I'm proud. That sounds like I'm her dad or something. I'm not Maria Friedman's dad, funnily enough. I just think she's brilliant. As I said, The Outsiders took home the award for Best Musical. However, it didn't take home the award for Best Book or Best Score. That went to Suffs. And this is only the 9th time that a show has won Best Book and Best Score, but not won Best Musical. The other times were On the 20th Century, which won Best Book and Score, but lost the big Best Musical to Ain't Misbehaving. Same for Woman of the Year, that lost out to 42nd Street. Into the Woods, which lost out to Phantom. Falsettos, which lost out to Crazy for You. Ragtime, which lost out to Lion King. Parade, which lost out to Fosse. Urinetown, which lost out to Thoroughly Modern Millie. And The Drowsy Chaperone, which lost out to Jersey Boys. Now, I think arguably some of those Best Musical winners weren't the best musical that year, and it should have gone to some of the others. I think Into the Woods should have won over Phantom personally, and I think probably Ragtime should have won over Lion King, and there are a few others in there as well that I think might not have been correct. So people will have their opinions on whether Suffs should have taken Best Musical or not. I haven't seen the shows and I haven't yet listened to any of their cast recordings, but I will be doing so this week. But it was quite interesting that that happened for the 9th time. The Tonys have started to annoy me because they've split the programme in two, so half the awards are done on a Paramount Plus special, and then it goes to CBS where they do the remainder of the rewards, and because of that, not a lot of people are watching it, and that means that the viewership of the programme is down. It's down 14.6% on last year to 3.5 million. This isn't the lowest the Tonys has ever seen. The lowest was, I think, in 2021, but it's still not great. Bearing in mind when Hamilton was winning at the Tonys, that got 8 million viewers that year. It's just frustrating because I don't think it's very well organised or well broadcast, and I think it could be done a lot better, and I think the ceremony could also be a lot better, and I think a different host and a bit of a change up next year might do it some good. The Tonys have a very large effect on Broadway and the shows that stay open and the shows that close. But for example, Great Gatsby, which only won one Tony for Best Costume Design of a Musical, has extended its run till next February, which is very impressive, and Hell's Kitchen, which won 2 awards, has extended to next May. However, Heart of Rock and Roll, which is the new Huey Lewis musical, is closing in a few weeks' time, only after 72 performances. It got no Tony nominations and obviously no wins because it wasn't nominated. So it's closing early, and this happens every single year, and it has done for decades. The Tonys really do affect Broadway audiences and what producers will do with a production. Tony wins really help to push a production along, and it's very rare that a musical that won Best Musical has already closed. I think Passion had closed when that won Best Musical, but apart from that, I'm not sure if it's happened again since. But it's just very interesting how an award ceremony really does affect what shows close, what shows stay open, and what things people go and see. Some new cast albums were released in the last week as well. You had The Wiz, Lempicka and The Heart of Rock and Roll all releasing their cast recordings. I've listened to The Wiz and I really did enjoy it. I enjoyed what they'd done with some of the songs. I don't know what they did with the Tornado, because that wasn't the Tornado that I know and love. It was, to be honest, pretty dire. I don't know what they'd done to it. That piece of music for the Tornado in The Wiz is one of the best pieces of music ever on Broadway. That's a big statement, but I just love it. And it wasn't in it. They took it away. And I was so sad. And that put a bit of a dampener on the rest of the cast recording, to be honest. And I will give Lempicka and The Heart of Rock and Roll a listen in the next few weeks, just as I said I would with the other Tony-winning shows. On the red carpet of the Tony Awards, Andrew Rannells gave some very interesting news. He was apparently set to star in the Broadway production of Tammy Faye, a musical about Tammy Faye, which was over here in the UK a year or two ago, which is now transferring to Broadway, and he's no longer involved. And He said on the carpet, "Unfortunately, we got into a situation where we couldn't quite find terms that made everyone happy, which is really disappointing, which is why normally they don't announce an actor before the contract." And then he laughed, which insinuates that they put him on the billboard and announced that he was being in it before he'd signed the dotted line, which isn't great. That's not very good practice, is it? I think that's slightly dodgy, but we shall see. Clearly he isn't doing the production, and something has gone awry and it hasn't gone as smoothly as everyone was hoping, which is very sad because I was looking forward to seeing what might happen if he did it and if he would get a Tony nomination or anything like that. And I was just, it's interesting that that happened and that he didn't sign the contract, yet they were announcing he was in it, supposedly. Very weird. In other Broadway news away from the Tony Awards, Idina Menzel has announced that she is making her Broadway return in Redwood. So this musical that she has co-conceived with Tina Landau, who is directing it as well, had its world premiere in February, and now it's transferring to Broadway, and she adds herself to the slew of women who are up for Best Actress in a Musical, possibly, who are in the running for it next year. I've spoken about it in the last 2 episodes, I won't go into it again, but she's made that list one person longer, and to be honest, Idina Menzel on Broadway, she is a Tony winner, and it just depends how good Redwood is compared to the other shows that are around. And also, the last 5 years, the very successful Jason Robert Brown musical is having its Broadway premiere, its first time on Broadway, in spring next year with Nick Jonas and Adrian Warren. Now, this is very exciting. You might be thinking Nick Jonas is a random choice, but he is a theatre kid at heart. He's done a lot on Broadway and in theatre in general, and obviously Adrian Warren is a Tony winner. And I'm excited that the last 5 years is finally getting to shine on Broadway and have a proper run there. But the interesting thing is, what Tony category is it going to be eligible in? Because is it going to be eligible in Best Original Score? Is it going to be eligible in Best Book? Is it going to be eligible for Best Musical? Or is it going to be like Little Shop? So Little Shop didn't play Broadway until the mid-noughties. I think it was actually 2003, I think it was on Broadway. And that production was put into the Best Revival of a Musical category because it was already so popular and so many people had done it and it had been off Broadway for so long. So it's an interesting rule and they change it every time and it's never quite the same. So it'll be intriguing where they put it. I have a feeling they'll do what they did with Little Shop and put it as Best Revival because this show has been around forever and it's been in New York a lot. So I think they might go down that route. It'll be interesting though because the show is 20 years old, I think, if not older. So if it's then Best New Musical or Best Original Score, is that fair? Who knows? Who knows? But it's exciting that it's finally coming to Broadway. Now let's hop back over here to the homeland to talk about one of my favourite pieces of news from the past week, that Imelda Staunton is becoming Dame Imelda Staunton. Oh, it's just perfect. It works so well with her name. I've wanted this for years and she's deserved it for a very long time, and I'm so glad it's finally happened. And she joins so many great actresses who are a dame and who have kind of got to that legendary status in their career. It's just a marvellous piece of news and is exciting because it's just in time for Hello Dolly. I don't know if they can market it as Dame Imelda Staunton until she's been given the... She doesn't get knighted, obviously, with a sword, does she? I don't know how it works when you become a dame. You must get that still. I don't know. However, I don't know if they can market it as Dame Imelda Staunton until she's had the official ceremony. I'm not sure. However, the news is just so exciting and so deserved, and I'm now just waiting on Sarah Lancashire, Olivia Colman and Julia Mackenzie, and then I will be a very happy man. We've got to talk about poor old Ian McKellen. The 85-year-old is currently starring in Players Kings, which is an adaptation of Henry IV, Parts 1 and 2, and it's a new combined version of that, a new version of the Shakespeare classic. And he was doing it in the West End the other night, and after a fight scene at the end of Act 1, he tripped on a prop on stage and went headfirst into the audience. Oh my god, I can imagine the panic in that theatre. And some woman's come out today and said that she was injured by Ian McKellen because he hit his head on her knee, and she's saying that the theatre didn't look after her properly but focused more on Ian McKellen. And I don't know if there's going to be a lawsuit or something there. I'm not saying there is, but there might be. I think there's going to be a little bit more to that story, but we will see what happens. However, he seems to be okay. The following performance was cancelled and he is no longer doing the rest of the West End run. However, that was only a few performances anyway, and he'll be carrying on with the tour in a couple of weeks' time, which is absolutely fine. But apparently he's doing well. He's had his scans and he's resting now at home. Thank goodness, because that could have been disastrous. Poor old Ian McKellen. I did feel quite bad. And I think whenever you, especially an older actor and a bit of a national treasure, when something like that happens, you do go into panic mode. It's like when you're online, when you're on Twitter, not Twitter, X, whatever it's called, when you're on there and you see someone's name pop up on the trending bit and you're like, oh my God, have they died? That is how I felt when I saw Ian McKellen's name. And luckily, currently, he's okay, which is all that I wanted to hear. So yes, get well soon, Ian McKellen. You won't be listening to this, but there you go. Jumping back to America, we're going to be talking about an auction, some antiques that went on sale, on auction? Is that correct English? I don't know if that is. But anyway, there was an auction, let's just say that, for Sondheim. Basically, there were 300 lots of Sondheim's belongings, furniture, memorabilia, books, you name it, it was there. And it was all from his house that they've just sold. It was a huge, huge auction, and no one really expected how well it was going to go. They were selling the most bizarre things. But they made $1.5 million on the lots. On those 300 lots, $1.5 million, which is absolutely insane. That is insane. Some of the biggest items were a gold record of West Side Story, the soundtrack to West Side Story, which sold for $46,000. You had a box of his favourite pencils, which sold for $6,400. And then you had Sondheim's first cheque for a song that he wrote, his first kind of published song, and that sold for just over $20,000. Oh my God, I didn't realise Sondheim fans were that rich, but clearly they are. But what a marvellous thing. And I don't know if the money's going to charity or if it's just going somewhere else. I don't know. I'm assuming it is going to charity. You'd hope so. But $1.5 million is absolutely insane. And congratulations to anyone who managed to get anything, because that is brilliant. And I wish I had as much money as you do. Another week, another load of concerts announced. By load, I mean one, which is Bernadette Peters live at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, which is happening this year on August the 12th. I love Bernadette Peters, I do, and I loved seeing her in the Sondheim show that she did, in the Sondheim concert, and then the Old Friends thing. And I will be intrigued to see what she does in concert that's different, because I know she sings a lot of Sondheim anyway. But I'd like to see her sing something from Mac and Mabel or something else that she's done. So I will try and go if I can, if I'm not busy or whatever. But yeah, so if you want to see Bernadette Peters live at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, you can on August the 12th, which is very exciting that she's coming back over here. It's brilliant. And then also this week we had Follies in concert at Carnegie Hall in New York. This happened on the 20th of June. And it was a star-studded concert of Follies, and when they announced the cast, they just announced a list of people. So Jennifer Holliday, Kate Baldwin, Len Cariou, Carolee Carmello, Christine Ebersole, Beth Level, Norm Lewis, Karen Ziemba, Julie Benko. The list went on and on. That is literally not even half of them. And no one was sure who was playing what part and who was doing what. However, when it came to the concert, the characters weren't played by the same people, if you get what I mean. So they had one person sing Losing My Mind, but also someone else would sing In Buddy's Eyes, and someone else would sing the duet Too Many Mornings, and so on and so forth, which I think makes for a really interesting evening. And I've heard a few bootlegs already, and it sounds pretty darn good. Jennifer Holliday sung I'm Still Here, which was just insane. And Kate Baldwin, who I adore, sung Losing My Mind, and it was beautiful. So that sounded like an absolute dream of a night at Carnegie Hall, and I'm very, very, very jealous of all the gay men that were there. And let's round up with a bit of casting news from this past week. Something Rotten is having a concert production at the Drury Lane from the 5th to the 6th of August this year, just before Bernadette Peters comes over. And they announced the full cast this week. You've got Jason Manford, Gary Wilmot, Richard Fleischman, Marisha Wallace, Evelyn Hoskins and Cassius Hackforth joining the big old show that is Something Rotten. I love this musical. I love this score, and this is the UK debut of it. It was meant to premiere in Birmingham before COVID, or just in 2020, I think, and it just never has happened, which is such a shame. But hopefully this concert reignites producers and people's interest in the show, and it gets a full-scale production. Jonathan Bailey has been announced to star as Richard II in a production of Shakespeare's play at the Bridge Theatre next spring. So this is happening after Guys and Dolls closes. Guys and Dolls has run for a very long time for a musical revival, especially one that isn't in the heart of the West End. So I'm giving them a little bit of a round of applause here. You probably can't hear it, but I am. So good on them. They close in early next year, I think January, and then Jonathan Bailey's in straight away. It's being directed by Nicholas Heitner, who is currently the artistic director of the Bridge Theatre, and I think it'll be marvellous, and I will want to go. I think Jonathan Bailey is a marvellous actor, and he's hit the big time in the last few years thanks to Bridgerton and a few other things. But I saw him in Cock, that play that he did was meant to do with Taron Egerton, but then Taron Egerton had to pull out. But he was brilliant in that, and he was wonderful as Jamie in that recent Company revival that won him an Olivier Award. So I think he's a fabulous actor, and I'm glad that he's returning to the stage. And finally, The Gilded Age, which is Julian Fellowes' big American TV series, much like Downton Abbey, set in the Gilded Age in New York, is adding even more Broadway people to its cast. It currently is filled with Broadway actors, and it makes for great viewing. It's a brilliant programme, and if you haven't seen it, and if you love Downton Abbey and that kind of programme, do go and watch it because it's brilliant. But Felicia Rashad, Jordan Donica, Brian Stokes-Mitchell and Victoria Clark are all joining the new series of The Gilded Age, which I think is either currently filming or is about to start filming. There's 2 seasons out so far, and yes, do go and watch it if you can. There's some brilliant performances in it. And this week's Fin to the Woods vaguely fun fact comes from, once again, Barbara Streisand's book. I've got 25 hours left on the audiobook. I have cracked through it a little bit this week. I said I was going to finish it, but I haven't. To be honest, it's a lot to get through, but it's so interesting. And I've done Funny Girl on Broadway. I've done all of that now. I've done Funny Girl in Hollywood. I've done Hello Dolly. So I'm getting through. I'm getting there. I mean, she's only about 25 in the book, so we've got a long way to go. However, I'm getting through. The fun fact is that I didn't know, I think maybe because I'm a bit stupid, I don't know, but Sidney Chaplin, who played Nicky Arnstein opposite Barbara Streisand on Broadway, is Charlie Chaplin's son. I just didn't know that Sidney Chaplin and Charlie Chaplin were related. And I think lots of people probably do, but I'd never put 2 and 2 together. But now I have, and it's kind of fascinated me. He wasn't very nice to Barbara Streisand, and it's a very interesting listen to hear her talk about it, because he kind of bullied her for a year or 2, and he was a not very nice man, apparently, which I found very, very interesting. And he used the fact that his dad was Charlie Chaplin to his advantage. And yeah, I didn't really like him from what Babs was telling me. But there's your Fin to the Woods fun fact. So that's it for another week of the Fin to the Woods podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my little delve into the Tony Awards amongst many other subjects. And I'll be back next week talking once more all things theatre.